Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. First item on the work session is an update on the MSO with Executive Director Stephen Bodwin.
Baudouin.
Oh, thank you. Great.
Bodwin.
You're welcome.
Bodwin. Okay. All right. Got it.
That's exactly how it looks.
Bodwin.
Would you know it?
I was just going to say Steve. So
That's
it's
fine
so
too,
much
Mayor.
easier.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Stephen Mark Baudouin, who is the Executive Director of the Maryland Symphony Orchestra and a proud Hagerstown resident dedicated to building a stronger, more inclusive and vibrant creative community. Prior to his role with the MSO, Baudouin served as Executive Director of FAME in Portland, Oregon, working to support artists and musicians with intellectual disabilities in achieving their full potential, and as a publicly elected board member and board chair of the Multnomah Education Service District, an $81 million public education agency serving over 100,000 students in Oregon. Stephen is a native of Independence, Missouri, and holds a Bachelor of Music degree from Boston's New England Conservatory. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Is this thing on? There, it's working. That's good. Well, thanks, Amanda, for having me. And the city should know how lucky they are to have you. We've had a chance to work together in a number of capacities with the A&E district especially. So thanks for your welcome. Good afternoon, Mayor Brucci. Good afternoon, Councilmember Metzner. Hello.
Hello.
Shelley McIntyre, how are you? Good to see you. Councilmember Heffernan, good to see you. Alshire and Keller, nice to see you as well. So I'm Stephen Mark Baudouin. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Symphony, and I moved here on September 9th, 2017. And I'm proud to be with you today to offer an update on the work of the Maryland Symphony, and I want to share some of the stories of the positive impact the MSO has made in our community over the past year. And I want to talk with you a bit about the road ahead for the MSO as part of the Hagerstown community. But first and foremost, I really want to say thank you. The city has been an avid supporter of the Maryland Symphony for as long as the Maryland Symphony has been around. And those of you that know much more about this community than I do, having been here only 10 months now, know that the Maryland Symphony has been here in some shape or form since the 70s. We were at one time the Maryland Theater Orchestra, when the Maryland Theater had a resident orchestra. And then we were at one time, I believe, called the Potomac Symphony, and then reconstituted ourselves in 1982 as the Maryland Symphony Orchestra, thanks to some amazing civic leaders like Bill and Francis Young and many other folks. So we have a long history, and the city has been with us every step of the way, and we appreciate your support. And I especially want to thank council members Emily Keller and Shelley McIntyre and Austin Heffernan for joining us at events in the last few months. I know Emily and Shelley, we saw you at Club MSO on the dance floor, both of you. Thank you for that. And thanks for joining us at the Salute Picnic, Austin and Shelley. And those of you that were not able to join us recently, we hope to see you in an upcoming concert. So I'm going to give you a little presentation and conversation, and want to save some time for questions as well. So just as a refresher, who is the Maryland Symphony Orchestra? Who are we anyway? Well, we're a professional orchestra with a $1.5 million annual operating budget. And that makes us the largest cultural nonprofit in the region. So the museum has a larger endowment but a smaller operating budget than we have. And our music director, Elizabeth Schultz, just completed her 18th season with the MSO, which is fantastic. So this slide represents probably some of the things that you think of when you think about the Maryland Symphony. You think of concerts at the historic Maryland Theater. You think about, you see excerpts from a production of Tosca, opera by Puccini that we did back in February. You think maybe about our education programs in the bottom left photo there. Some students at, some MSO musicians at Pangbourne Elementary playing for Pangbourne students. The Symphony Ball, which is a great civic event every year. So this is a lot of what people think of when they think about the Maryland Symphony. You may also think about, of course, Salute to Independence at Antietam. What you may not think about is this new face of the MSO. And this is the MSO that we want to see as an opportunity for expansion and growth, especially in building community here in Hagerstown. An MSO that is doing concerts that are engaging families and kids. We did the Disney concert back in April, which ended up being the highest grossing show in the MSO's 36-year history. And we had almost every seat at the theater filled for 2 performances, and a fabulous costume parade where kids and families came across the stage showing off their Disney attire. That was an amazing event. Up in the right-hand corner is a photo from Club MSO, which is our concert after party for young professionals, which has become a real hit for us. Of course, no civic leader has arrived in Hagerstown unless they've received their own bobblehead. And so there's members of our staff in the right-hand corner with our Elizabeth Scholl's bobblehead. And then in the center photo on the bottom is something I want to talk a bit with you about, which was, that's an MSO string quartet performing at the first annual Washington County Creative Leaders Group Advocacy Day. And the Washington County Creative Leaders Group is an organization that I helped to found with my colleagues at the Museum of Fine Arts and BISFA, the Maryland Theater, and the Washington County Arts Council to really bring together a stronger sense of collaboration and collective impact amongst the disparate cultural institutions in Washington County, especially the ones that call Hagerstown home. And I was surprised immediately that there was not a higher level of collaboration in arts and culture here, not only programmatically, but in every sense. And part of what attracted me, and some of you have heard me speak about this before, part of what attracted me to move to this community from Portland, Oregon, was the sense that art and creativity and culture is really one of the most important animating forces in Hagerstown. And in every respect, one of the most important animating forces economically, one of the most important animating forces educationally, socially. And I think with this Creative Leaders Advocacy Group, we have an opportunity to work together more cogently and affect the kind of change that we want with respect to policies, funding, programs that will really produce better outcomes for families and kids. So this is some of the new face of the MSO, places where things are changing. We're in a time of transition and change, like much of Hagerstown. And so I just want to highlight some of the things that have happened in the last year inside the organization. So we just ended our 18 fiscal year on June 30th. And in the last year, we welcomed over 60,000 audience members to our concerts. So that's in our concerts at the Historic Maryland Theater, at the Antietam Battlefield, and we also do concerts, one in Garrett County and one in, where's Frostburg? Allegheny County, thank you. We served over 11,000 students through our education programs. Those are primarily Washington County students through our partnership with Washington County Public Schools. And those are from pre-K to high school in our kinder concerts, our high school masterworks program, ensembles in the schools where we send string quartets and brass quintets out into public schools. And there's some good outcomes additionally with ticket sales. Subscriptions are up for us 7% year over year. Single ticket sales are up 21%. We broke some records this year with our Symphony Ball, which is our signature gala event, raised over $110,000 for the MSO. And our Disney concert ended up being the highest grossing show in our 36-year history. We started some new programs. We launched Club MSO. I mentioned the Young Professionals post-concert after party, and also launched the Frederick Friends of MSO. We are a regional orchestra, and we have a special relationship, of course, with our backyard community. And one of the biggest market opportunities with respect to audience and donor engagement is right down the street in Frederick. So we're really focusing beyond our support and engagement in our backyard community here in Hagerstown. The very next market opportunity is right down the street in Frederick. We also built and strengthened these backyard relationships, spending a lot of time, especially someone new to town, learning about what makes this community work and the organizations and people working here every day. And we also adopted new vision, values, and strategic goals. And so this is a critical piece that we've been working on over the last few months that is pretty significant for us organizationally. So we know that what we say really matters as an organization. The words that we use to communicate to the public and how we say them, those things matter quite a bit. And so we spend a lot of time in conversations with community over the last 6 months talking about what are the challenges and opportunities right here, and what role do people believe that classical music and music generally can play to improve the lives of people. And so this is the vision that has resulted, and this is the first time in many years that we've adopted a vision statement. And this vision is music for everyone, enriching lives, connecting people, and building stronger communities. And what you'll notice about that is that the vision is really focused on people, on making a positive difference in the lives of people. And the values that we've adopted are excellence, innovation, inclusion, community pride, and advocacy. And we know that as an organization born and raised in Hagerstown, we do have a special relationship with this community, and we have a responsibility both to own our challenges and also celebrate our strengths as a community. And those values really speak to that. So what does this mean for the future of the Maryland Symphony? Well, this is what we get to find out together over the next few years. Certainly, we're not going to become a different institution. We're not going to suddenly become a social service agency. But our why is different. Our vision is different, and our values point us in a different direction. Some of the things you can anticipate the next year, and I've got some season brochures to share with you, is certainly in service to this value of community pride, highlighting local artists. So collaborating and highlighting the work of fabulous artists that are right here in our community. So working with jazz singer Carenza Gray, working with students from Clear Spring, Williamsport high schools and BISFA, collaborating with the City Ballet of Hagerstown, which is a fabulous youth classical dance company. So a lot of collaboration with local artists, an expansion of the Club MSO program, so we're doing 3 of those this year, continuing our education programs, and a lot of conversations. And this is the first of many conversations we'll be having with the community to understand what are the opportunities that we have to help address civic challenges and needs. Often, especially in the public sector, when individuals think about solving civic challenges, perhaps artists or musicians are not the first people that come to mind. But we want you to think about music, and classical music especially, as something that can help address civic challenges and help to solve social problems. And Shelley and I and Chief Brito have had some initial conversations about some concepts in that space. But we see a lot more conversations happening in that space about how we can use music to connect people, build community, and help solve social challenges that are here. You know, and I was thinking on the way over today, I don't know if any of you have had a chance to see the Mr. Rogers documentary called Won't You Be My Neighbor?
It's on my agenda.
It's on your agenda.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
You haven't seen it yet, though. So I got to see it a few weeks ago, and it was incredibly moving. And one of the things that made it so moving was, Fred Rogers, who is just an amazing educator and a fabulous musician himself. And one of the things he says that's a kind of a theme for the movie is this quote that love is at the root of everything. All learning, all relationships, love or the lack of it. And I think that all of us at the Symphony really believe that music does play a role in building the kind of loving and caring community that we want here, and that in some cases we really desperately need. And this is a place that has this fabulous and fascinating mix of hurt and hope and possibility and challenges, and really music and all the creative arts have been such an important part of this community's history. You know, the Moeller Organ Factory right up the street, and the MSO is proud to call Hagerstown home, warts and all. The community that is here is our community, and the challenges that are here are our challenges. And so I could talk at you more, but I just wanted to give you, oh wait, the final thing I think I would tell you, oh, this is a good story to end with, actually. Andrew Dowd. So one thing you may not know about the symphony, when we were founded in 1982, most of our players were Hagerstown and Washington County residents. So they were really talented amateur musicians that lived here. Primarily today, our musicians are not from Hagerstown or Washington County. They're coming from DC, they're coming from Baltimore, they're coming from Philadelphia. Andrew is one exception of which we're very proud. So Andrew's a 2013 graduate of South High School, and his introduction to classical music was coming to Maryland Symphony concerts at the Maryland Theater, and originally picked up a different brass instrument, and his teacher said, maybe that's not the instrument for you, and found his way to the tuba, went to Western Virginia University, and now is a student at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, which is one of the most prestigious music conservatories on the planet, and he is our principal tuba player. So for him, the opportunity to come home to his hometown orchestra and be part of this community is something that he's very proud of. I'd love to see a day where 25 or 50 or 75% of the Maryland Symphony are musicians born and raised in Hagerstown or Washington County, and they're coming back to play with their hometown orchestra. But we'll start with one today. So now it's open for questions that you may have for me.
I don't have any questions. I think that, you know, what you've done for the symphony, I mean, we should all be very proud of having the symphony orchestra here in Hagerstown. You've done an amazing job. I would not have been at Club MSO or been a member of the, you know, the organization if it hadn't been for you and your presence and your tenacity and excitement. So kudos. I think that I look forward to the year ahead and all the years after that. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Thanks, Shelley.
Yeah, I'd like to also echo that, you know, what you were doing to try to bring the creative community together. I was at the meeting over at the museum, and I think that's very positive. A lot of very good ideas came out of that, I thought.
Thanks. Thank you.
And Maryland Theater, the Maryland Symphony, and I would agree that arts and entertainment, music and teaching are the fundamentals of this community. And I thank you for recognizing it. We've tried to make it that way.
Thanks. Well, this council has played a, not only for us, but for, you know, the theater project. I know you made an investment in that project recently, and that affects us in a hugely positive way. I mean, our offices are moving over there. We're going to be on most of the second floor in that building. It allows us to have more expansive programming in the space once it's built out. So thank you for seeing that.
Thank you.
I echo all three of them, all of that. Thank you for everything you do.
Thanks.
Kristen, anything?
No.
Stephen, thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry that I tortured your last name the way I did. Make sure it doesn't happen again. But appreciate you coming and doing your presentation, and I look forward to the MSO's year ahead.
Thanks. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
It's an exciting year, Phil.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure looking through.
Thanks.
All right, the 2018 Blues Fest report.
We've made a lot of progress in the last 12 months on Blues Fest, and I want to recognize Kitty Clark. She came on board with us in December of last year. Managing an event of this scale takes experience and skill. She brought that with her to the city of Hagerstown. So she not only jumped into her new job, but really jumped into a year of change with Blues Fest. So I'm going to turn it over to her for a recap of the 2018 event.
Thanks. So today's purpose primarily is to recap the 2018 Blues Fest event. So I want to start with the positives. Some of the positive results of the event included a really top-notch lineup of excellent performers, great music, professional backstage and technical team, a smooth rollout of the logistics of the new layout, because it was a new layout this year with the setup of the one stage and the diagonal seating arrangement, and a number of cost-saving measures and efficiencies that were created. And perhaps one of the most positive results is that the event came in better, net cost better than what we had budgeted. So the budgeted cost had been $52,000. The preliminary draft results show a cost of around $39,000. And this is, and we're very proud of this, over $70,000 in savings over the 2017 cost to the city, which was $112,500. We used an online ticketing system this year, Eventbrite, which allowed us to capture data, which I think previously had never been captured before, and it allowed us to find out where our attendees come from. So the data showed that 9 states and the District of Columbia were represented, and more than half of those people, about 53%, came from Maryland, followed next by Pennsylvania at 18%, and then right on down, as you can see on that pie chart. And then further, if we look at just the Maryland attendees, we can see that 42% came from Washington County, followed equally by Frederick County and the Baltimore City and region, each at 20%. Montgomery, PG County represented 12%. Garrett and Allegheny counties represented 4%, and the Eastern Shore represented 2%. So moving to the less positive, perhaps, is that we can see that attendance and revenue of the 2018 event were lower than planned for. The revenue was lower than budgeted. The sponsorship revenue was 76% of the 2017 revenue. So we had raised $64,000 in sponsorship this year compared to just over $83,000 in 2017. Ticket sales revenue was 57% of the 2018 revenue. So we brought in a little over $16,000 in ticket sales compared to almost $29,000 in 2017. The beverage sales revenue was also down, was 48.5% of the 2017 revenue. And the merchandise sales were also down, also about 48%, about half of the 2017 revenue. Attendance was also lower than expected, with the exception of Friday's event, which was the free general admission attendance. And that actually had an increase of 36% over the 2017 Friday night attendance. But the Saturday general admission attendance was about 75% of 2017. There were 521 people this year compared to 692 last year in the general admission area. Eventbrite, the online ticketing system, also made it easy for us to track the use of the VIP tickets, and we found that only about half of the tickets that we distributed were used, both on Friday night and Saturday night. So, for example, we distributed 507 tickets on Friday and only 243 were used, and on Saturday we distributed 646 tickets and only 323 were used. I do want to point out some of our cost-saving measures, efficiencies, and complementary activities, which, working very closely with Jill and the DCED staff, I think it has given us a lot of things that will serve as models for future events, whether it's Blues Fest or any other event that our department or any city department organizes going forward. So some of those cost-saving measures included, for this event, shortening the event to 2 days and also shortening each day. This was designed to encourage people to get, to continue to stay downtown and go to restaurants, and it also led to lower city service costs. We had just slightly fewer bands, 9 this year over 2 days versus 11 bands over 2 days in 2017. We only had a single stage, and we only had one single location, all taking place in the central lot. Really importantly, we utilized the RFP and competitive quote process, which clarified the needs of the festival and definitely led to cost savings. We used those for graphic design, catering, the back line, which is the instruments, the onstage instrumentation, merchandise, and soft drinks. And finally, we partnered with Leadership Washington County to sell our merchandise, which costs less than hiring a for-profit company to do the same thing. Some of the efficiencies that we instituted included hiring Paul Benjamin, a blues music expert and consultant. He booked the artists, provided advice, and served as an MC. We integrated a comprehensive digital marketing campaign into our overall marketing plan. And some of this included video advertising on YouTube and other websites, micro-targeted mobile advertising to people attending similar events in the region, an email and IP targeting campaign, and digital ads in such publications, online publications as the Frederick News Post, the Winchester Star, Baltimore Sun, Living Blues Magazine, DC Blues Society, and the Herald Mail. And we also did Facebook, lots of Facebook posting and several Facebook boosts. And the digital campaigns were deemed successful in terms of the click-through rate, which is kind of the standard measurement of whether your digital campaign is successful or not. Of course, it does not tell us what people do once they click through, right? They click through, and then we can't gather any more data, except if they bought tickets or not. The digital campaign complemented more traditional print, radio, and TV advertising, which was done in Blues Music Magazine, which is a national publication, the Frederick News Post, the Winchester Star, the Herald Mail, WYPR Public Radio in Baltimore, 106.9 The Eagle, and a variety of cable TV stations through Antietam Broadband. We utilized the Eventbrite online ticket sales, which made for easier purchasing and better data collection, as you've seen. We utilized an online system to solicit and manage volunteers, which was really helpful. We updated the sponsorship packet and offered a more comprehensive benefits package. We kept the focus of the event on downtown by having all events take place in the central lot. And we kept the volunteer t-shirts undated so they could be used in future years. Some of our complementary activities which augmented the 2018 Blues Fest included Governor Hogan's visit to Blues Fest. So there's our very own mayor up there on stage, and the very happy HPD, who were thrilled to have their picture taken with the governor. We also collaborated with Main Street Hagerstown to distribute a downtown savings pass to attendees. So this allowed people to take this pass to go to various restaurants downtown to get different deals and specials. And we deepened our relationship with the South Hagerstown High School music program and had their commercial music ensemble play at the Blues Bash and also again at the Blues Fest kickoff. And that was, I think a lot of people were really impressed with the caliber of those kids. They were amazing. So moving and looking to 2019, some points of consideration. So we had an excellent musical lineup booked by a nationally known blues festival producer. We had a comprehensive marketing plan, and yet attendance, beverage sales, merchandise sales, and sponsorship were all down, which continues a multi-year trend. We believe that aspects of the current model of Blues Fest, including the same genre of music, reliance on corporate sponsorship, reliance on beer and merchandise sales, may need some examination. Businesses are asked to sponsor more and more local events. The beer distributor has suggested that people don't drink as much out anymore due to, fear of DUI, and that younger generations just don't socialize that way at all. And there are other newer local and regional events that are competing for people's time and money, and those are just three of things that came up just this year that are new and they look fresh and they're different and maybe attracting people's attention. So if we know that the event objectives include putting Hagerstown on the national map, getting people downtown, increasing hotel stays, and promoting other tourist activities, we need to give some consideration as to how a festival can better achieve those objectives. Staff is suggesting that consideration should be given to possible reinvention, rebranding, and/or additional new thinking for 2019 in order to achieve growth in attendance. So while we are here today primarily to recap the 2018 event, we are also looking for general direction from Mayor and Council. What direction do we want to go in 2019? We are recommending support for reinvention. 3 options are shown here. Number 1 and 2 are rough concepts, which we want to float by you. Any reinvention would include consultation with community members to flesh out ideas and gauge interest. We believe it is positive for Hagerstown and in its best interest to deliver an event that meets the objectives that were stated previously. something that has growth potential and leads to upward trends in attendance. We know that no matter what event we produce, it needs to meet the objectives outlined earlier: getting people downtown, increasing hotel stays, promoting tourism, getting Hagerstown on the map. We know that city staff across departments have worked together well to create a logistical template that can be used in the implementation of any downtown festival. And following your direction, we will come back in August to provide a proposal and budget for a 2019 event.
So we'd be happy to take any questions on anything in the memo, as well as in the PowerPoint presentation, anything on the financials. And we would like some early direction and guidance on where we go for 2019.
My personal opinion is that we keep it a blues fest, but looking at sponsorship revenues, we did 76% of the year prior. Honestly, I think that's pretty good considering we went from 3 days to 2 days, and there was a lot of media coverage of, is it gonna happen, is it not gonna happen? Speaking from a business owner perspective, I would have been hesitant to sponsor at a big dollar amount a festival that was clearly being talked about as, are we going to do it, are we not going to do it, is it gonna be a success, is it not? So the fact that $64,000 we raised in a year like that, I think speaks volumes. I think if we say now, this is a concrete event, it is successful, here's what we're gonna do going forward, that we should be able to certainly raise more next year. But I think 76% of what we did the previous year throughout all of that turmoil is a pretty good turnout.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just start with the back page. I'm not interested at all in option B. Someone might be able to convince me if there's more staying power, if there's more buy-in from the industry that wants to attend in something like an option A, but I'm not sold that that's a direction that I would like to head either, at least not this early. In the post report. I continue to believe, though, that the event needs to move to maintain or regain some of its success. I just don't believe that it should be in the area where people need to park to get to the event. And I know folks say, well, there's 2 decks and other places, but there's a reason folks like to go to malls, and it's surface parking. It's easy, convenient, it feels safe, and it's walkable. So I just think that it needs to be moved over to the cultural trail. I think it needs to tie in to the project, and I realize we're sort of a year away from that, but I think that's where it needs to end up so that people feel like they're at an actual festival environment and not standing in the middle of a parking lot. I just think that's fairly stale. I can still remember when, it was sort of 2 streets, Potomac and Washington, and they sort of flipped stages, every other hour or so, and it felt like there was movement in a setting like that, and so that's something I think has to happen. That it has to move to an area that's more conducive to easier flow of the public.
How long is the Blues Fest? How many years? I'm sorry.
We just finished 23.
I mean, I really think that a lot of times that an event has a life cycle of 10 years. When we did the food truck festival, we had one $1,000 sponsor, and the rest of it was tickets. And it had nothing to do with Leadership Washington County. It had everything to do with the fact that it was new and unique and something interesting. And we raised $12,400. It's crazy. And that was in a parking lot. I am very interested in keeping it as a music festival, but I really like option A. I think that's, and in conjunction with what Kristen's saying, and putting it on the trail and maybe mixing some art inside of that. So I think that putting it on the cultural trail is quite appealing.
I agree with that as well.
Yeah, but I think that putting it, like different music or maybe a country music festival, it's a very popular genre in this area. So That's just my 2 cents, but I think that, again, I echo Emily's thoughts, you know, I think that the sponsorship, it's hard to get sponsorships, it really is, so I think that's a great job, so I thought it was a good event, good job.
And I would commend everybody for what they were able to achieve also. I totally agree with Kristen and Shelley that I think the venue needs to change. I, for one, and just me speaking, think option A is without question the way to go. I agree with what we're seeing is reflective of what Shelley says. No matter what we're trying to do, we keep getting less and less people coming, and there's a reason for it. And I also think option A, if done properly and figuring at the right time, could certainly fit into our Civil War heritage here. I loved when I saw North meets South, East meets West, and I don't know if that's the right mix of music. Whether you, I don't claim to know that, but I think the idea of a Hub City Music Festival, of a rebranding, and I also think we need to consider whether we want to skip next year. And I say that only because hopefully next year at this time, we're going to be really in the midst of all the construction downtown. And if we're really talking about a change of venue and we're talking about a rebranding, it would give us that additional time to really put things together. I'm not opposed to doing something next year, but when I see everything falling off, I just think we may be much better off trying to reformulate what we're looking to do. And with option A, you really open yourself up to more local talent. That's good local talent. I mean, not fair local talent, but high quality. We have you know, people like Kenesha Gray, people like the Plate Scrapers that are more than just minor local talent. And when you open it up, that becomes a whole different ballgame. And the last thing I will say, and I direct this at Austin as well as everyone else, we always find ourselves in April and May saying, you know, we need to talk about the budget a heck of a lot earlier. And I'm just going to point out to everybody, this is what happens. We actually make the budget decisions
Way before.
in July. Okay, and then in May, we're saying, why didn't we discuss this stuff? And the reason is obvious. If we're going to do a festival next year, we've got to decide we're going to commit the funds now. But that's what happens a lot, and then you get there and you go, how did we get here without even discussing how we got to this point? And that's how it does happen. So that would be my suggestion.
And if I can clarify, as we built the FY19 budget, we budgeted in as this year was presented. So in the packet, the budget column is built into the FY19 budget. Because it's an early June event, it'll fall within the current fiscal year.
Okay.
So there were a way to do more events, like smaller events, instead of doing this one big thing. You know, I look at First Fridays in Frederick or Waynesboro's Main Street things that they're doing on a weekly basis. I don't know if the cost would be a little bit less to do something of our own tied into this and maybe taking a year off, but, you know, kind of reducing the
Well, you
getting
know,
people downtown. I don't know.
yeah, and that's also becomes the question, is the whole objective to do it downtown?
Right.
Especially, well, you know, one thing, we talk about that cultural trail. And again, if we can do it there and we get this the way we envision it, it's almost like talking about having in City Park as having it downtown. Once people understand that, hey, all you gotta do is walk a quarter mile on this beautiful cultural trail and you're downtown for our restaurants.
Yeah,
And-
I mean, I'm not opposed to putting it off a year. I would prefer, though, that it be a big event when it comes back. But I think for me, you know, and I've said this for a number of years now, as sort of this process developed, I guess I always envisioned, you know, even when I was commissioner, I envisioned, you know, from the University Plaza Park you know, that there would be a courtyard behind the theater and that it would link over to the open space behind the library as sort of this chain of green spaces, you know, that are fairly controllable downtown. And, you know, I realize the trail went a bit of different direction than that, you know, as it developed. But for me, like, that's, I guess, what I would envision that festival being, and that's why I get back to this notion of it being mobile to the patron. One of the best things about the you know, the theater events was the fact that folks were able to be mobile. You know, in fact, one of the last conversations we had on those was, you know, how do you wrap it around Washington Street? Because the area that, you know, it was confined to just became too constricted. And so for me, I guess, number one, I would prefer it be big and fairly singular, especially in its first year. And number two, that it occupy, you know, that space in its entirety and not just one succinct little area, so that people do feel like that they're at, you know, an event. Especially as someone with kids, that's a nice thing to have to, you know, to keep that movement going.
And can I give you some thought processes? Just trying to think in and outside of the box. If we put it off a year, and so I'm only looking at that issue for what I'm about to say. You know, when the Blues Fest started, there were venues both at the Maryland Theater and at HCC. Now, if we're talking about trying to get the people and trying to spread it out, I can envision a music festival where the headliner is playing at the Maryland Theater, remembering what the Maryland Theater is going to look like when we're doing this in 2019. That's where the headliner plays. There's also music in the plaza. There's also music in the band shell at the Maryland, at City Park, and potentially music at University Plaza. Those are venues that I could see spread throughout. I don't know whether you would do them simultaneously, how you do them, but if your headliner played at the Maryland Theater early, you would pack the Maryland Theater, and in the beginning, when we had people there, that's what happened. And then you could bring it out into the street, into the other venues.
That fits in well with option A, a music
Yes.
festival, and then you can have different genres of music
Exactly.
in different locations, and hopefully draw a multitude of different musical tastes.
And obviously, some of them free, and some of them are expense.
And I'd like to add another idea that maybe even tying in sports and a 5K. And what I mean by that is having different bands at different locations throughout the 5K in order to enjoy the music. I mean, it's kind of crazy, and it works. They do it in, you know, some other cities, but, and then people for people that don't want to run the whole time, they can stop and dance at whatever they want to and just keep running to the next band. It's interesting. You can charge for, you know, the 5K admission and generate some more income that way, so.
For some of us older folks,
He's gonna run.
the most popular event in this community for years was the Park Arts Festival.
What was it?
Park Arts Festival, which was nothing but arts in the park. It had similarities to, I guess, Boonesborough days there, but, you know, if we can think about combining things like that, getting the arts community, after we just heard from the Maryland Symphony Theater, and what the executive director is saying, geez, nobody ever got everybody together. If we could collaborate, if we could spend 2 years collaborating with the symphony orchestra, with the Arts Council, and say, we're gonna have a Hub City Arts and Music Festival over the weekend of whatever, and get all these organizations, the Barbara Ingram School. And I honestly believe that the local talent we have across all of those lines could be done between what we saw with the South High Band and the Barbara Ingram and the Maryland Symphony and the Hagerstown Municipal Band and the jazz bands. I think you could have one heck of a festival throughout this entire town
And that's when we get the paddle boats in the park again. And we just, as Kristen says, we make it a big weekend. We make it like Berkeley Springs has with their, some of the, and Catoctin with Fall Fest. It's mob.
And draw some artists and vendors.
Yes,
Vendor artists who want
absolutely.
to sell their wares.
And that's a major doing. I mean, thinking on those lines, I think it would take 2 years to put that together.
I love that idea. Like, I think all of that, doing a weekend festival, including local art and local artists and local bands and multiple locations, I think that is an incredible idea and what we should be doing as a city. Separate from that, I don't think it should replace the Blues Fest or something like that that is music specific, that draws in people from other areas and other towns because they're coming to see big name blues artists or jazz artists or whatever it may be. I don't know, in my mind, I don't think they're two separate. I think everything you just described is exactly what we should
With the
happen.
headliner at the Maryland Theater.
With the blues,
With
With
whatever
anything.
genre you want.
I guess my brain is just in
blues mode.
I see what you're saying, and it's a beautiful vision and exactly what needs to happen here. And then I see like a blues, to me,
I don't
it's
think we
just
can do
not.
both, though. I mean, I think that as far as sponsorships and stuff, I think that you'll just,
You're gonna.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's where
think
the
you can
problem
bring in
would
the
be.
outside crowd. I mean,
You're gonna
there's no
dilute
question
the-
about it. If you have the headliner, I was just out in Denver, and I have to commend the folks at Blues Fest over the years. You know, I'm seeing at Red Rocks, they're constantly advertising Joe Bonamassa is coming. You know, I think if we had him here. I see Derek Trucks is a major international, we had him here. And it's great, and the problem is, we still declined on the attendance. But you get the headliner at the Maryland Theater, yeah, you'll get the out-of-town people. But it's all food for thought.
I think staff is actually looking for some direction.
I just think it's time to change. I think that, you know, it's been a long
Well,
time.
I guess the first
that's all.
question is, do we take a year off?
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that
becomes
is
the
the
first
first
question, right?
point of direction, yes.
I think we have it budgeted and we have the capacity to do a signature event in 2019. To what scale that is and how much it changes, but I also agree with giving enough lead time if we're making a monumental change to a new event like the Hub City Arts and Music Festival, that we do need to give ourselves enough lead time.
My concern about next year is if one of the objectives is to bring in all the folks from out of town, I just want to know what our downtown is going to look like.
And I think it
Are
would
we
be-
going to have nothing but construction on Washington Street, on South Potomac Street, on Antietam Street, and traffic tied up and people going, wow, this town is just being torn apart? Or are they going to come in and see a brand-new Maryland Theater, a brand-new plaza, a brand-new addition to the cultural trail, and the city the way we want everybody to see it, in a venue that's not in a parking lot?
I think it's a very good excuse to be able to take a year off. You know, I think
Or
like
to
we
move
can.
it to another venue,
Or-
whether it's
right.
Fairgrounds Park or City Park. But I think a downtown venue next year could hurt us more than help us.
Yeah, I'm in favor of taking a year off, and as it applies to the money that you've identified as being budgeted, I don't want to see that simply not expended and rolled into the reserve. I would rather see it reprogrammed into whatever improvements are necessary for the other events we already have programmed to make them even better. In other words,
I
if it's
agree.
$50,000, and at the end of the year, what we've done is we've simply dumped that in the reserve as unexpended funds at the end of the year, instead of expending it on those other events, you know, that we know are going to happen, then I think we've wasted that funding.
Or you could take that money, if you don't do that, you could take that money and make sure that you earmark it for the larger event for 2020, so that you're not, because
So
you're
they
gonna
have
have to
unexpended
fund that 2020 event, and if it's going to be quite a bit larger, you're gonna need more funds than what we currently have in there. So you can do one or the other. I mean, they're both very good ideas.
And I would only venture to say that I can conceive a 2020 event that would not cost as much if the decision becomes that a substantial amount of the talent we hope to find is local. But that could be.
I'm in favor of taking a year off and saving it for a very large, effective event in 2020. New theater, I think that would be
And
beneficial.
matter of fact, yeah, I forget, when is the groundbreaking supposed to be on the theater? I mean, the grand opening?
October.
2019.
Perfect timing.
Well, you may get, it's what I'm thinking, you know,
I'll just throw in there too, that we've discussed also that maybe that first weekend in June is not an optimal weekend for a big
No,
event.
you know,
I think
There's
it
so
affects
many
our
conflicts.
my thought process would be to start immediately talking to the Maryland Theater about how we may be able to do something in conjunction with them around their opening. Because, I mean, I would really think what we want to do is showcase our city when this
October
opens.
2019 is going to turn into like February of 2020. I mean,
I don't know.
That'd be dangerous
to plan a big event.
Always the optimist.
I would only know they've done well so far.
September and October, they're very tough. I mean, there's so many things going on at all the time. It's really, really hard to plan all of that.
I just
and-
think you're looking at a new event early summer 2020.
Even midsummer, 2020.
Oh, that may be.
Because I just think, and we're basing that off of one item within a, you know, a program of 10 projects, or, you know, whatever the number is going on. So, you know, I hear you saying, well, you know, the schedule for Maryland Theater is October 2019. Well, there's 5 other things that are being constructed, you know, and redeveloped at the same time. That's why, for me, I'd say if you're going to do this, you're obviously going to take
Where's the
2019 off.
fiscal school going to be?
So, yeah, you're going to be early summer 2020.
Okay, well, one thing we can effectively say is that we're gonna tell staff not for next year. We're gonna start
Which is 19.
planning. Right, start planning.
2020.
Right, start planning for 20.
And we'll come back to you with the event concept further fleshed out
Mhm.
in a proposed budget.
What are you going to do with the cost savings of this year?
We just
I would
went through
suggest-
all of this to make this festival happen, and now we're saying, never mind, let's take a year off.
No, I think there was always.
I just think this backpedals all the year that we just fought to have this festival and made ourselves look bad in public because with sponsors and everything else, and now we're taking a year. I understand why we're doing it to regroup. I just think it sets a horrible precedence after what the last year of them working really hard to revamp it to make sure we kept this festival.
Well, I don't think,
Well,
for me, it's
doing
not
it
about
to regroup.
regrouping.
No, it isn't to me
For
either.
me,
It's
what
about
I'm
what's
saying is you're gonna have
downtown is gonna
downtown
look
torn
like.
up,
Yeah,
and we're gonna
that's
shove
fine.
an event in a parking lot again.
Yeah,
But
that's
we've been
fine.
shoving it in a parking lot for.
But not with
And I've been
downtown
saying I'm not in
torn up.
favor of that for like 10
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not in favor of spending money again to have an event in a parking lot. I think I felt that way last year and the year before that and the year before that. I just don't think
And I
it's the
also
right
think,
place.
Emily, if we go to our sponsors this year and tell them what we're doing, that we may find we have some excitement
Yeah.
about what will be
I don't think
happening.
we're gonna lose
Something
any
different
ground.
I
and.
think,
Yeah,
I think Music
uh,
Fresh is gonna be
Yeah,
compelling.
I think everybody's gonna be happy with this, and my concern is downtown being
I don't even care if you wanna give the money to the Maryland Theater and say, hey, here's the money, here's the 40,000. I'm even okay with this. Go book 5 blues, acts.
To make up for it.
Yeah, to make up for it over
Yeah.
the course of the summer. I'm completely fine with spending the money.
I am.
I'm not okay with
That's
spending
actually
it
a really good idea,
in a
Kristen,
parking lot.
to
Right.
allow, to keep like that,
Record that.
here's
I
the,
would certainly suggest.
No,
money-
that does not go on
money
record
stay in
that I
this
said he
year's
has a good
budget,
idea.
and we sort of direct staff that if we're going to use that money this year, that it would be used in this type of
Yeah,
funding.
you want blues bands downtown, I'm great with saying, hey,
Right.
Maryland Theater, here's 40 grand, go book 4 more, 5
You'll
more.
find out what we're
acts,
doing with
whatever.
this current budget year's cost savings that we realized, which is around $12,000.
Yep.
What are we doing with that? Is that going in the general fund reserve?
Yeah, that would have to, yes.
I got a great idea.
Oh, boy.
Because remember, you have to find out whether or not everything goes into the pot. And then you have to find out whether it's a negative or a positive. If it's a positive, then you can do something with it.
I know,
about
well, if
the
that
same.
12,000 is a positive, it needs to
Yeah,
go
I
in the
get ya.
economic redevelopment
I hear you.
program that we just.
Oh, yes.
Hopefully,
Yes,
we'll
you're
take a look at the end of the
absolutely
year,
right.
and
All
hopefully
right.
we'll save enough to put it in there.
And we'll come back to you with a proposal for how to redirect, as you have indicated, the fiscal year 19 funds for continued programming, event programming, outside
And whatever
of the
that
large-scale
entails,
event.
right.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll put some ideas together and bring that back for you to review.
Great.
The only other thing I would add about, we talked a little bit about multiple events, and one of the things, I think one of the things that hurt the Blues Fest on Saturday, this time, was the threat of rain. You know, that's always a big,
Most definitely.
a big thing to try to get over. But the other thing that I just keep seeing, and this past weekend was one of those, there were so many things going on in other communities that it took away from what we were having here. And I had already made plans to be out of town, and, you know, that one weekend, you know, if you have a big weekend, a big single event like a Blues Fest, and you can't go, I mean, I would really like to see us do more, possibly smaller events throughout the year.
We could also do a save the date now, or at least leading up to it, and
Something.
so then everyone else is scared of our event.
Well, that's a good point,
You
because
know?
publish early what we're
Right.
doing, you know, get that on the calendar.
And I would note, however, that, you know, one of the things that our citizens just don't take advantage of sometimes. I mean, we've been having music in the park every Saturday in the summer for free, with high-quality bluegrass music for years. There are few things more enjoyable or nicer than the Hagerstown City Band every Sunday night, the entire summer. And that is very well attended, actually. And for those of you who haven't attended, you really need to go there so you can appreciate what they offer. But, so we do have that stuff, but I don't think it reaches outside of the city very much, city residents. And I'm not sure why, because especially the Saturday events are very high quality.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ethics ordinance amendments.
Good afternoon.
Good
council
afternoon.
members, Mr. Mayor,
Good
Madam
afternoon.
City Administrator.
Was Reverend coming? I had him down as.
I had expected Reverend Steele and maybe
Yeah.
some other members of the commission to be here.
Yeah.
And I just emailed him a moment ago
Okay.
and did not hear back from him. So it's unusual for him not to be at an event where his presence is
Just an
expected.
ethical dilemma.
It does. I have a way forward, and in light of sort of the time crunch that you all are under, let me propose this. Assuming that everyone has taken a look at the memo, there are certain revisions to our code of ethics which are mandated by the state of Maryland. And the revisions are supposed to be in effect by October 1 of this year. And so I think there is a time sensitivity to those. I also think that there is a lack of controversy with respect to them. So my thought would be that I move forward talking about the mandatory revisions today, and I would prefer to have someone from the Ethics Commission actually here present to present the non-mandatory but suggested revisions at a later date. So if no one has objection, then I'll just go through the revisions that are required under state law.
I would only indicate that on that issue, I don't need anybody to tell me that I think we're missing a word on the one that is not mandatory, and I would vote against anything that involves saying a gift includes raffle prizes or door prizes. I think that's absurd, and the Ethics Commission needs to understand that's absurd. And I'll give you an example. Every MML dinner, there's a 50-50 raffle.
Everyone.
If you told every elected official in the state that they couldn't get a raffle prize, there couldn't be a 50-50 drawing. And even though everybody at those 50-50 drawings donates it back, you're donating back money you just won. So winning it and donating it back is still an ethical violation, and I think what the Ethics Committee needs to know is that by a 5-0 vote, we don't need anybody to tell us. We already know what we want. We want them to understand clearly that they are not defined as gifts. And I do think the Ethics Commission, and you are correct, Jason, that they need guidance on that issue. So if they need guidance, the guidance should be specifically that they are excluded as gifts. And if they want to tell us why they think we're wrong, that's fine, but I don't think it's going to change anybody's mind. It's not going to change mine, I can tell you that.
I agree.
I agree with that. Right now, the Hagerstown Aviation Museum is trying to raise money by raffling off a vehicle.
Oh, yeah, I mean, every place you go, there's something, a fundraiser.
Yeah. I have to-
And that's how you don't, I mean, I can write a check out to the Hagerstown Aviation Museum. It's a lot more fun to bet on a Jeep.
Yeah.
So I think we all
I
want
just
to
have to
send
do it
that
today.
signal.
Well, it's certainly, Councilmember Metzner, and as you alluded at the beginning of this, that there may be an ethical dilemma. Of course, I advise you all, and I advise the Ethics Commission. That's one of the
Right.
things I'd like to address at some point in the future, but we can leave that for another day.
But otherwise, I totally agree with what you're proposing to us. But-
All right. Well,
But I
then-
think we all sort of
If
read
I'm,
that.
then if I may, with respect to the memorandum that has been presented to you all, does anybody have questions with respect to the 4 mandated
I have a question
provisions?
back to the other one.
To-
Does that include things that you're not there for your official capacity on?
You're talking
But with
about,
organizations with which you have a relationship? Example, Chamber of Commerce golf outing Friday, right? Get close to the pin on a par 3, you get a chance at the end for those 4 individuals for $1 million. All I'm saying
well, we know
is-
Mr. Messner is safe on that.
Right, you're right about
So all
that.
I'm saying is, you're not there in your capacity as an elected official, but you're there, you know.
In your personal
In a personal
capacity.
capacity, but you're certainly have a relationship, a direct relationship with that entity.
There are a couple of things with response to that question, Councilman Alshire. One is, I did a little bit of research with respect to gifts, and there is a State Ethics Commission letter that was issued in September of 2015, where they talked about prizes that you receive in your official capacity. And they say, under no circumstances, if you're at an MML meeting in your official capacity, they say that you should not accept any prize in excess of $20 value, or that you should donate it back to the organization or to the entity for which you work. What they don't say is, what if you are there in your personal capacity? So that's my notation on the side, is what about if you're there in your personal capacity? So that's one point. The other would be, if it's an entity with which the city doesn't have any dealings, then I don't think that the
I'm talking
statute
about the ones
would
we
come into
do.
play. If it is an entity with which the city has some dealings, then the proposed revision would come into play.
Even if you were there on a personal.
Even if you're there in
Yeah,
your,
yeah.
in your personal capacity.
That pretty much answers that.
Am I allowed to comment on this?
You-
I would if I were you.
Because I've been waiting a year to say this. Let's be honest. If the person that started this witch hunt against me would have had the guts to just reach out to me directly, that it wouldn't have become a thing anyway. So, instead they went to the media, which made
Sounds
it.
pretty familiar, but go ahead.
Yeah, which made it this fiasco. But I think it's insane to say, like you're saying, everywhere we go, there are 50/50s. I know I got lucky because I bought a ticket and won a car, and it ended up on the front of the paper a million times. But we win stuff all the time at chamber dinners, at Rotary clubs. They have a 50/50. I mean, I think that's just putting a huge restriction on stuff. We have normal lives. I mean, we all attend events all the time as human beings, not as.
What's the fact? Think about the word. I mean, if you want to, if somebody wants to tell us that we can't do raffles, say it. But don't say that it is define a prize that you put money into and win as a gift.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to say
So if we win the
that elected
lottery, what
officials
happens?
aren't allowed to play raffles or lotteries, Yeah, I mean, we deal with the state of Maryland, and we're not allowed to play a lottery ticket?
Yeah.
What's the difference? However, I think Kristen got it. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Are you done?
Oh.
This is where, you'd have, and Kristen brought up a perfect example, the chamber golf outing. I mean, I don't go there and play as mayor, because I've been going there for like 20 years, so, and I wasn't the mayor a lot of that time. But if I go there now, and I buy a raffle, an arm's length or 4 raffle tickets, and I throw them into the jars of, if they get picked out, if they pick out one that's, let's say, a weed whacker, guess what? That's more than $20, you know? But I'm not there as the mayor, I'm there as, you know, Bob Brucci, who plays golf and plays in this tournament. I mean,
Doesn't
it's,
make any difference, though.
I just,
Any more than it does with any of the other stuff.
I think there's some clarification maybe that we need to maybe then just make a distinction between elected officials and city employees, because city employees, that could put them in a very difficult situation.
Absolutely.
A city employee
That's
should
right.
not win or should not even buy a raffle ticket at a chamber event, period. I mean, that, if the city employee is there because they're there for the chamber, that would be a clear conflict, and they should not even buy it, and certainly if they want it, they should donate it right back. So I don't know if we need to make a separate
But so you're saying city
clarification.
employees couldn't buy, couldn't.
Not
go
if they're
to-
there as a city employee and it's someone that we do business with, absolutely not.
Well, okay, when you say as a city employee, okay.
Yeah,
I understand that.
A-
That's like,
absolutely
that's
not.
like CJ having dinner on us versus me
Right.
taking CJ out to dinner because we're good friends.
Right.
Okay, I understand that.
Neither
But does
would
that
happen.
mean that a city employee should not buy a Bonanza Extravaganza ticket because that is,
No, because they're not there in city, as a city employee.
okay.
That's my understanding of what you're saying.
Well, that city employee, you know, doesn't manage the employees that they're
Well,
buying the raffle.
I think what you're saying, we get a table at a chamber dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and city employees come because some of the elected officials didn't. They're there as representing the city.
Right.
So in that forum, you would not expect them
Right,
to
they should. So
buy
I don't know if
something
whether we
like
need to
that.
put language, because right now, it doesn't say that, so.
Yeah, I think, and leaving it open-ended, I
Yeah.
really have a thing about contracts or anything else that are open-ended to litigation. I like them to be as succinct and defined as possible.
Right.
So there's no question in anybody's mind as to what's right and what's wrong.
I mean, I think even in your official capacities, if it's someone that we have a contract with or we do business with, you should think twice about, that's my personal opinion.
Well, that fits right into the MML thing, though. Well, MML, there's an argument they do business for the city. I don't know.
So should we not go to the MSO ball, that tickets cost $250 and you have a chance to win something? Or should we not be going to the, I mean, almost everything you go to, there's always drawings and this
No,
and
You
that.
could
and-
not
and
enter the
what I'm
drawings, or you
wondering-
could donate any
Valerie,
kind of your winnings back.
Yeah, but we're saying we don't agree with that. I mean, and I think, my own opinion of this is, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
I'm
but-
saying that the distinction between elected officials and city employees, then,
I
because
understand that. and-
I have to give direction to the city employee.
I fully understand that, and my thought process is, there is a difference between needing that in the ethics
Yeah.
book, and that being a city policy, that
Okay.
that's the way it is.
And maybe that's the
And I
difference.
think it's much better if it's going to relate to employees and not elected officials,
Okay.
that it's a city policy
Okay.
that employees need to understand. I do have a question about what you asked, though.
You're going to have to be more specific.
Under
Mr.
the mandatories.
Yes, sir.
What is a former regulated lobbyist?
Former regulated lobbyist is someone, if you lobby with the city, you're required under the Code of Ethics to register with the Ethics Commission. I don't know that anyone has done that, not that I'm aware of during my tenure. So that would be someone who comes under, you're talking about, Mr. Messner, 33-3A7.
Yes, sir.
Again, this is mandatory. revision, and it
Right,
says
I
if you have registered with the city to lobby, then you cannot be involved in that. You can't become elected or become a city employee and work on the same matter for 1 year after your registration has been terminated. So if you were a lobbyist and you came before city council to lobby for baseball stadium or something like that, and then you became an elected official, you could not be involved in that matter for 1 year after you had terminated your registration. Does that make sense to folks? I don't know that there are any people who are registered with the city right
I've
now.
never heard of anyone doing that.
It's in the,
Okay,
it's in the code, Your
It's
Honor.
just in the new code, yeah.
No, I'm just telling you,
Yeah.
I've never,
Right, I don't think we've ever
I
had
think we've ever had anyone.
Well, and it's,
Understood,
it's,
but if the state you would, it would be much more probably.
it's probably more prominent
Yeah.
within the state, and,
Thank
Oh,
you,
I'm
I
sure
just
it
didn't
is, yeah.
understand what that was.
yes. So, then if I may ask for guidance, is it okay for me to prepare an ordinance making the mandatory revisions so that we can get them? We may be able to have them in front of you all for the regular session at the end of this month, and that
I
would
forget what
certainly
we had
have
on
us.
schedule. I know we had like the approval would be one date in August, so I can't remember when the.
What I had calendar, Ms. Means, was to introduce at a special session in August and then pass it on the 28th, and that would have it ready in time, but I might be able to get just the mandatory provisions done in
You
time
got
for the
2 weeks,
regular.
right, to the.
Yes, so I could get that done, and then the other items, we could come back at some point.
Right.
I will say that, in meeting with the Ethics Commission, and again, it's very sensitive for me, advising them, advising mayor and council, I do think that they're not in some bubble that they don't understand what you all are doing. I think that they take very seriously their mission to make sure that there is transparency in government and faith in government, and I know that's a goal that you all share as well. So, if there are any further questions, then I will ask my leave of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Rental licensing code amendments.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? We were pretty sure we were gonna get bumped. We were gonna get bumped.
You were sure or wishing?
Pretty sure. Not wishing.
15 minutes.
Not
worth,
wishing.
so.
All right, we're here to follow up following the 2 public forums that we had in May and June. In the packet, we put together some information for you, refreshers on where we've been with this. So there's the ordinance that was tabled back in May. The memorandum from April 5th, the last time we talked about this one in depth was April 10th. So that PowerPoint is in the packet. I put together notes on what folks were saying at the public forums. And then we include the public statement provided by Judy Wheeler in support of the proposed amendments, and then the signatures of support from the 70-something, seemed like neighborhoods first kind of folks that signed that petition that got circulated. And then we provided more information. The last exhibit Paul put together based on his visits with our communities, as well as responding to some of the comments that we were hearing at the public forum, the common themes that we were hearing. So we weren't sure what you wanted to do this evening, whether you wanted a refresher of what was proposed, and then hear from Paul on some of his, what he's been finding in other communities, as well as some responses to some of the common themes we were hearing at the forums, or how you wanted to handle this.
So, I'm just gonna start, because, and I'm just gonna say at this point, I'm somewhat, I think I'm a little bit lost in this process, and I think it's frankly because we've had so much discussion about it. I mean, I've, 5 or 6 different, memos here, and I've been trying to keep track and keep everything from prior meetings, including the 2 sets of public comment periods that we had, and the petitions that we received and the emails and things. And, when I look at this most recent memo from staff, there are two things that I focus on, and the first is the ordinance, which I have sort of my own separate copy here from a prior consideration when the mayor and council tabled it. And of those sort of 7 items, I have which ones that I'm okay with and which ones I'm not. The same goes for the second part of this packet, which includes the other memo. And again, areas where I am okay with things, and then parts of that which I'm not. And I know they're sort of both the same thing, but the second memo lays it out a bit more succinctly than what just the simple language does in the ordinance submission. And I don't know, and I've gotten the feeling that there's a majority of council in favor of any one of these items that you have in this packet. And at some point, I'd like to get to a place where we can say two things. One is, go through this list and come up with the things that there is a clear majority of support or opposition on, regardless of what that is. And then get those things enacted, and not have them set aside or set in abeyance in perpetuity as we continue to discuss and flesh out those more controversial things that we're not giving you clear definitive support or objection to. And I can take this almost in 3 pieces. And, the one is the dormitory, homeless shelter, residential care facility provision, which I think you could reach, some consensus on. The other is the inspections for the new construction and rehabs, and then the obviously the opposition that we have to the right of entry. And I really don't think that provision is even needed. I think you have that under Maryland State Code. And the revocation provisions, but this middle section of this revisions to inspection schedule for dwelling units, I feel like those other 2 pieces are going to be held up as we continue to deliberate on what a reasonable compromise is for a very structural change to how we sort of do business as it applies to that one component. And that's just my 2 cents to try and make some sense out of this and at least move parts of it along, and then are able to sort of nail down, a little closer on those remaining components that we don't. Otherwise, I think we're going to be sitting here for another 3 months.
Well, we could do that. We could just start either at the chart or at the original ordinance and go through and see if we do have a consensus or even a majority on some of the items. And
On like 1 through
we most
7.
certainly can. We can amend the ordinance and make those changes and get that done, or you can always come back and amend the ordinance again if you then decide later. What do you think would be easier to, the ordinance, which is included in your packet,
I think
it did have 7
sheet
bullet
number,
points.
Packet 2.
It has 7 bullet points.
But those 7 bullet points in this verbal format for the ordinance
they're not
are
as-
not as clear as memo number 2
Okay.
in the packet, in terms of being able to look at this and say, okay, here's what we have now, here's what staff is recommending we go to, for us to be able to say yay or nay.
Well, let's go.
Are they,
We
are
can
they
go
in
down.
coordination to each other? I mean, like number.
pretty close,
one-
yeah.
Well, then why don't we, for the public's view, why don't we go down 1 through 7, but we can refer to memo 2 to get the more succinct explanation. Like number 1 is very simple. Add dormitory and residential care facility definition, rental unit. Define each, establish license fees for dormitory and residential care facility of $100 plus $10 per unit.
I'm absolutely no. Absolutely not.
So, and on memo
And you go to memo 2, what's the first one? Rental unit definition, existing provision, proposed provision. Under homeless shelter definition, it explains it.
And then the license fee, yep.
Yeah.
You're not in favor because of the fee, or not in favor of inspecting those residential units at all?
I'm not in favor of the fee.
I mean, I don't care if you waive the fee entirely.
But
I'm not in favor unless we actually have a conversation with those entities to
Exactly.
get some, and this is I'm gonna save people a lot of time here. If a vote is 3-2 on these changes, I will veto it. I believe that in order for us to come to a consensus, which I think you can get from this body, is to do what was done originally when landlord registration was implemented, which was to sit down with people in a group, and you can pick who if you want, 2 landlords or whatever you want to do, and go over these changes and get feedback from them and find some common ground that you can bring to mayor and council and say, listen, this is what we've agreed to as this group of people, staff, landlords, the REACH shelter, whatever, and say, this is what we've agreed to that, everyone can live with. I think then you'll get a consensus on this council. I think if you don't do it that way, you're not going to get a consensus.
You're saying 2 separate people because this has nothing to do with sitting down with the landlords.
It does have something to do with sitting down with people like REACH, Rescue Mission, and those individuals,
I think it's
which we haven't done, right? I mean, we haven't sat down with them and discussed these changes with them, have we?
No, but
And got their feedback and found out,
No, we've had interactions with some in the past when we were trying to figure out who they were subject to for external oversight, and what kind of guidelines they use for maintenance, inspections, that kind of stuff. But no, we have not sat down with them to talk about what's being proposed here, but we were just trying to figure out, are they sufficiently supervised by someone that we don't need to be involved? And our research was,
That
most
they're
of them,
not.
no.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, I keep going back to the point that I've made over and over, is that we appear to be okay with overlooking the living condition, the minimum living condition standards for the most vulnerable living spaces within the community.
But what is the alternative? More people under the Franklin Street Bridge? I mean, if we.
I don't think should be there to begin with. But what I'm saying is,
Can't have it both
okay,
ways.
yes, you can, because you can't, let's say Holly Place. Let's say Holly Place isn't in the program, and I don't know if they are or not. I'm just using an example. Are they currently or not?
I do not know offhand.
Okay.
They're considered assisted living, which I think we consider to be like a nursing home, and nursing homes are not in the program.
So there's an instance where that place, there's a fire on South Potomac the other month, flashes over, and we haven't been in that place ever. And we have no idea what those conditions are. It's a residential property that, is not owner occupied. And whatever tragic events occur, and we don't, it has something to do with some code that we would have otherwise, applied in virtually every other rental property, and we say, it doesn't need to apply to these places.
The Holly Place could, if they are, a fee like this would be terrible for them.
I don't care about the fee. I can
Okay.
waive the fee to 0. I'm fine with that. There just aren't enough of these places to begin with, and we shouldn't be charging these places that are providing this service.
think
All I'm
we're
saying is that
proposing
we should at least have a minimum
assisted living.
awareness of the living conditions, and that they are of a minimum standard comparable to those that we apply to every other living condition of, this type of space.
We were
in the city.
proposing to add a place like Holly Place, an assisted living facility. We still think of that as being like a nursing home, which is subject to significant state oversight. We
Yeah,
don't.
exactly.
We don't have them in what we're proposing, we didn't include assisted living.
You went about and asked each of those places.
We didn't ask Holly Place.
Most of those places.
We asked the homeless shelters, that was the direction that we received, so we reached out to those type of care facilities.
And Wells House and W House.
Right.
I just don't get that. I just don't. I just don't know how you say, you know what, Mrs. Smith, it's okay, in this space, because we've inspected it and it meets the minimum livable standards for health, safety, and occupancy. But you know what, Mr. Smith over here, yeah, we don't care.
What
That's
are
crazy.
the minimum standards? I mean,
That's
we have
crazy.
landlords freaking out every single day about standards that we're putting in place that they don't want to do for their rental units. Is that the same standard we're gonna hold a homeless
Yeah,
shelter
you mean like the
to?
guy who
Like, I'm-
just got an email covering his carpet over the heating ducts? Yeah, I completely believe that in those instances, we should go to those landlords that are complaining about getting dinged with items like that they should clearly be doing those things
But you do know how many homeowners probably do a lot of that too, that we can't
I
control.
don't know.
So, a lot.
I don't know that.
Well, no, we don't, but.
They make that conscious personal decision to do that in their living space.
And so do
Okay,
tenants.
wait a minute, we had an email about what now? About someone who covered
That's another subject.
Yeah.
I just am saying with the people who,
I didn't see that.
Covered all their.
what is a
heating
minimum
vents.
standard quality? And
How
everyone
many
deserves a
house?
safe place to sleep. Like, I'm not debating that. But at the same time, the homeless shelters are already struggling for funding. We obviously have a homeless problem. And we have 1 million other people that are a paycheck away from being in that same position. Are we gonna put more people out on the street?
Because it's
Well,
not just
I-
the fees, it's just the fact of
Well, just
how much
6
it's gonna
months
cost them to
ago-
bring this up to this standard.
Just 6 months ago, we had this very same discussion of a hotel that we knew people were living in a condition that was not safe. And what did we do with that? Every single one of us at this table said, you know what? This place isn't safe. This place isn't safe, it needs closed up.
And it costs the Community
and
Action Council
corrected.
tens of thousands of dollars to place those people into homes. That's why I'm saying, if we continue to do that, I mean, where's that funding gonna come from?
So then I guess the answer is they just live in those unsafe conditions and we roll the dice. And if that's the case, then we should not complain at all when staff comes to us with the next hotel and says, you know what? The fire system doesn't work, the fire doors are chained shut, the staff doesn't even know which rooms are where,
In that
that
example,
one's leaking
other
down to the
entities
next
picked
floor
up
of
the
the other.
burden of the results of that. The Community Action Council and 1 million other churches that put their funding together to deal with the burden that was that hotel. Like, we need to figure out if the worst case scenario is happening in those homeless shelters, what is our next plan? Like, that's what I think. I can't make that work in my head. If you go in and shut a place down, and I'm just using this as an example, that has 15 beds in it, what are we doing with those 15 people? What entities do we have to make a plan for them? Because it becomes our responsibility at this point, or else they are gonna be living under a bridge, which is gonna have him freaking out because everyone's gonna be emailing him about people on the streets. There are consequences to actions, and we need, like, steps forward.
I don't freak, just so you know, I don't freak out, so.
Well, you know what I meant. You're getting, people are reaching out to you all the time saying, do something about this, do something about this, do something.
I
like,
think we have two different issues here. I think Kristen and Emily were both right, okay?
True.
And what I mean by that is I do believe we need to inspect these facilities, but I do not believe these facilities should be inspected in the manner that what we envision apartment rental registration
I'm okay with
inspections
that.
would be. I think Kristen is absolutely right when it comes to life, safety, and health. I think we did the proper thing when we were told of the issues at the hotel. I think we're required to do that, and I think if we found any place in a shelter in which people were living in a situation that in hindsight, after the fire, that if you were to say, yeah, we knew about it and didn't do anything about it, shame on us.
in the same respect, do I think that the homeless shelter should be said you don't pass because they don't have a strainer in the bathtub, or, and I don't think
I'm fine with that.
and that's why I'm saying that both of them are right. And therefore, I think what we need to do is move on to those at a later date, or have staff come up with what type of inspections those places need to have. And if we're not going to charge them, which I don't have a problem with not charging them, it should be minimal life safety inspections to make sure that we have, I mean, if we're gonna put people in a setting where there's not a smoke detector or a CO2 detector, that's not right. And is the street better? It might be, especially if there are children involved.
Kathy, is it not true that we have the right now, under the fire life safety code, to go and do it now without making
do
any
we-
change?
Do we exercise that?
But do we do it?
It would not be through our department.
Right,
That would be through the fire.
Are we doing it?
The same thing that we
That's the
did
basic question,
up at the
are we doing
hotel.
it?
right, but the question is, are we doing it?
Or did Reach open 12 years ago or whatever, and we haven't been back in 12 years?
Right.
Yep, we are
I'm
doing
sure
it.
we've inspected.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm pretty sure
I
that a
don't
lot
know
of
if
us have been in a reach shelter
Right.
and been given tours over the last 12
We're
years.
not
Right, so
inspectors.
that's just.
But if that's just the minimum standard you want to go there, then I think
I
we
think-
have that tool in place already, and you don't have to make any change to it.
Again, don't you think reaching out and having a conversation
Yes,
with
I
Reach
think-
as
I definitely
opposed
think they should be
before
invited to the
you.
conversation.
Yeah.
And that's my point I'm trying to make.
I
Listen,
agree, Bob, I
you know,
agree, Mayor.
As much as Emily fears kicking people out of homeless shelters, I have the same fear that we're gonna go into a residential rental property and we're gonna find issues because it's the 36th month and it's time to inspect. And, you know, what happens when we find these issues? Do we tell the landlord they have to kick the tenant out? Do we give them 30 days to fix it before we say they have to kick the tenant out? And now we've got people on the street from these residential properties that we may have caught the next time they turned over, but we didn't catch the last time they turned over. You know what I mean? You following me? I have the same fear that Emily has, but on a much larger scale.
I will say this, with the fears that we have, do we experience them now with the program? No,
You're not-
we do
there are
inspections.
30% of the properties you haven't been in.
Exactly. And so, but are we kicking people out of their homes now? No. And do we do inspections while they are occupied? If someone complains about something, yes.
Well,
So
someone
we
complains,
work with,
right,
we
right.
work with the property owners to gain
Okay.
compliance. We're not going in, doing an inspection and evicting people.
I think
That is
that
the
people need to
perception
hear
that
that,
is,
Paul,
that
just
that
so
is
you
the
know.
perception out there, and that is far
Well,
from the
that's what
truth.
people need to hear.
For all of the places I visited, that I've went to and talked to them and seen how they've done their inspections and stuff, that fear does not exist in those communities. That's a fear that has been personified in this community here of that we're going to go in and evict people. That doesn't happen. It's extreme situations. Today was in a place that a landlord was renting for $135 a week. It had no drywall, no electric, no plumbing inside the place, and they were renting for $135 a week to a resident. And the only reason why that the wife and kids moved out is because he got shocked and he called us. So it's places like that that yes, those places would be immediately evicted because that's unsafe for someone to live in.
So my concern, and I hope what we've done on the other one is understand that's one to move on to, and I would encourage us to talk to the homeless people and shelters and get there. But my concern with everything we're doing is the last memo, page 3. When I read it, what it essentially says to me, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but what it essentially says to me, if you don't want to participate in the program, you don't do it. And there's absolutely nothing at all that we can or do about it. I mean, that's.
What are you talking about, Lou? Where
It's
you at?
on number 7.
On page 3 of the, what would be numbered 7 memo, it's 2 pages from the very back. So, you know, citations, fines can be levied against, leaned against the property. The same goes for issuing license. If they're not allowed to renew, the landlord still operates the business no matter if fines occur or not. We've revoked licenses as well. Since the ordinance has no vacating the property due to no license, the landlords continue to operate the rental property. Now they don't have a license and don't have to request the inspections. Again, fines do nothing to change this behavior. Revoking licenses did not work and only benefited the landlord. So, and I hear what you say about evicting tenants, Bob, and I only say this to everybody. If what we are saying is that we ultimately have absolutely no enforcement tools at all, other than the goodwill of the landlords, because if they don't pass, they just refuse to register, they don't pay for a licensing fee. And so what we're describing with what you saw today are clearly not people who are participating in the program at all. And then I get to the point of wondering if the only people we're doing this to are, quote, good landlords, because the very first thing that we know is none of the bad, of all the people that aren't participating, probably 90% of them are the bad landlords. And so we have all the participants, and they're the ones coming in complaining. I don't hear anybody coming in complaining and saying, oh, by the way, we don't pay the licensing fee, we're not licensed, and therefore we're not inspected. And I also understand about saying you lien the property, and then all we do is end up saying, geez, now we've got to lift the liens because we can't sell the property at public sale to anybody. So that's my concern. I have to have somebody tell me, what is it that we're going to do to enforce the code? It's like having speed limits and saying, don't worry, if you get a ticket, you don't have to pay it. That's my whole concern. I just don't see what we're doing here.
And I think every landlord that I've talked to, and you guys can probably say the same, they're saying we have what we need on the books, we just need to enforce it. They feel like a lot of the changes are unnecessary, but I don't.
If we don't have, in companion to revoking a license, you can't fill your building, then we don't have the tools to go after the bad guys as they want us to do.
Okay.
Because they'll just keep renting them
Okay.
without a license.
And then we say that, and they continue running. What is our next step?
As in other communities, they give 60-day notices to the properties and secure them and make them uninhabitable.
They turn off service.
Turn off service, shut the doors, close it up. They're not allowed to occupy those buildings anymore.
The thing that I kept hearing in our meetings loud and clear from the rental property owners and the property managers were that they're in favor of the whole rental licensing and everything else. They would like to see us punish the non-compliant and reward the compliant.
And I think
that's all they want.
I think all five of us have probably said the same thing.
And I see that you had the tiered system kind of in the back here, you've got like some of the.
Talked about it. Our
just
community
some
is not exactly ready for that because we
Yeah.
just do not know what the conditions are out
Right.
there in this community.
So it sounds to me like there are two pieces to this particular component, which I sort of deem part two of these three pieces, is you want the revocation provision for that, for the shutdown. And
If it doesn't come with, you can't rent your property, it has to be empty, then it doesn't really do us
that's
any
what I
good.
mean, you need that piece. That's what you're saying.
If you really want us to be able to
And-
have a serious impact on what
Okay.
people are referring to as the bad
So
landlords.
to me, that's item one that you need, and I think that jives with what we heard from the landlords that did show up. Because I'm pretty sure that most of the folks we're talking about didn't show up. And the second piece that I think that we're looking for is, how do we get into the places we haven't been in? And so for me, I feel like we need to figure out a way to write whatever we need to write to do those two things. Give you the close-up shop piece and give you the opportunity to see what's there at least once. And I don't know how you do that. All I'm saying is, if you can find a way to write those two things in that doesn't create this entire new sort of juggernaut of system that applies to everybody, in frankly, in my opinion, in an overwhelming way, then I think we'll be able to accomplish what we're saying and what we heard the audience say. And I don't care if that involves, shutting off water and sewer, linking water and sewer accounts to change, change in occupancy, whatever that takes. I feel like that is to some degree a database-driven, analysis, but if you can get those two pieces, I'm completely okay with those two pieces.
It's gonna be a challenge for us to be able to tell you definitively, here's a list of all of them we've never been in or that are not reporting tenant turnovers. Some parts of the city are not in the electric, in city electric, which is a really good way for us to figure out if people are
But
turning
you
over
know
and not
which ones you've
reporting.
been in, right? I don't care about the turnover. I don't care if turnover's happened or not. What I'm saying is if there's some way we can write this that allows you to get in everywhere you haven't been at least once,
And I agree with Kristen, and then I also.
then let's do that.
And if you can't get an extensive list of every property you haven't been in, that's okay, because I have the feeling that you're gonna probably have a big enough list to keep you busy for a while if we're talking about 52% of all the rental units. And the flip side is, we have a lot of work to do if what you're going to do is come back and say, we have no ability to find out rental units that exist that aren't registering. Then we have a problem. We need to figure out how to do that, because otherwise things are defeated. You're relying simply on the goodwill of landlords to say, we rent.
Which is why other communities just say every 3-4 years, we're coming in every year.
Systematic
Coming in,
inspection.
but if you don't know the
Yeah.
units,
You don't know they're there,
you're telling me
Yeah.
you can't identify the units. It doesn't do us any good if you can't identify what unit is being rented.
I see two things, Councilmember Metzner. One, there's one, which units are being rented. So a lot of times that's single-family homes. That's a very challenging one to identify in the community. University of Austin, or Texas Austin, did an analysis of the rental licensing program down there, and that was a very challenging for them to identify single-family homes.
Totally understand.
Because that's very difficult. The other flip side of those is when it's a registered unit and then it's a 6-unit apartment building, then which units you hadn't been inspected in that 6-unit building. So I see there's two sides to what you're saying there. And for the analysis that I provided to the mayor and Councilmember Alshire was that I could tell you that at XYZ property, we did 4 inspections at that unit, or had 4 inspections since the program started, and there's 6 units there. So I can tell you theoretically, there's 2 that we haven't done. It would take a more analysis, depth review of reviewing paper files to determine which units have we done, because those 4 inspections might all have been in 1 unit, and 5 we hadn't been in the rest of the building.
And I think the other thing, and I understand what's happening here, and staff is being asked to do something totally, completely different than the way it's been operating, and it may involve that you spend more time doing analysis right now that you haven't been doing because of what we're requesting. But the other thing that I think all of us are requesting is, we have some landlords that own 1 or 2 units, and we have some who own a lot of units. And then we have the John Does that I won't have to name, that, okay, this landlord, we want inspected, and oh my Lord, this thing is horrible. That landlord needs to go to the top of the list with every unit they have then. We get another landlord, we haven't been in the place, and we go in their place, and it's perfect. I'd put the other units that we haven't been in that landlord, when we talk about tiered systems, and this doesn't have to be written in an ordinance. It could be used as common sense by staff, because clearly that we don't have the staff to inspect all the units every year. I mean, that's clear. So you have to prioritize what units you're going to inspect. And I think you have to prioritize units that, A, you haven't been in, and/or units that you have been in for landlords that clearly have a whole lot of difficulty complying with things. The other thing that I think that has to be done, I understand this doesn't exist. If it doesn't, it sure needs to exist. And that's the checklist for what the rental inspectors are looking at.
We
What they're
have.
inspecting.
We did a detailed checklist on every item that could, because it came from the community
That's
on when
great.
we cite doors, they didn't know what that meant. So we went through it all and
Could
did a
you-
delineated list.
Could you make that list available to all of us so we see what it is? And then, as it relates to that, I heard things that I hope were wrong. I would love to see one landlord say, yeah, I'm on the failed list because I didn't have a stopper in the bathtub. I would like him to produce the letter that said he failed because of that. And if he did, I'd like staff to explain what you have to do to fail on that list that we have of inspecting, of real failure versus a, hey, by the way, we inspected, you passed, but you know you didn't have a stopper in the bathtub, you need to replace that.
That's the direction that we generally go, because there was a list in 2008 that was created by the council of what items not to
Well,
inspect.
that's why I said I'd love to
That's-
see the letter that that landlord claims he has.
Right.
Because that becomes important when we have a public meeting and a landlord, we all heard that, didn't we? Am I crazy that he stood up and said he got a letter saying he failed because of that? I'd like him to produce that letter. Because if
And
it's.
it be recent, like not 2006?
Right, yeah. No, exactly,
Right.
because if he can produce the letter, then staff has some answers for us. If he can't produce the letter, then we're back to, well, what are we hearing? Okay, that's all. But I understand, like I say, what we're asking for is gonna require different type of work maybe, but we really would like to see you get in
I
places
think
you haven't
you'd
been in.
find if you would sit down with some landlords prior to putting any of this together, but especially now, I think you would find that you're gonna get some direction of where to go when we're looking for those type of landlords that Lou says are the worst of the worst, that should be at the top of the list. I happen to know one who is keeping detailed records of those derelict properties. I truly believe that if you actually, again, as opposed to coming to mayor and council with changes, sat down with landlords, sat down with again, the homeless shelters, and had a discussion and came to a consensus with them of what you're trying to accomplish and what you want to accomplish, I think you could present to this mayor and council something that would fly right by, and you'd never hear a complaint. But, you know, I mean, and Lou has the stopper story, I've got other ones. But, you know, and Emily's right. I mean, I get inundated with those kinds of things. And I want to see us to be able to come to some kind of consensus with these property and landlord owners so that, you know, we don't get those kind of messages. We don't get those emails. We don't get stopped in the grocery store for 45 minutes in the aisle, okay, trying to explain what we're trying to accomplish.
As Kathy and I've mentioned before, it helps us if we're shared those stories.
I understand.
If we're not told anything, then how do we know? How can we address issues?
Well, and that's why we gave people the opportunity to come here and speak their piece, okay? 2 opportunities, actually. So hopefully, again, if we weren't involved, and staff and these landlords were involved in a conversation, you could present to us something that would pass that you wouldn't get any blowback from, and they would have agreed to it.
You have to involve more community leaders than just landlords, because landlords are going to, as anyone would do, want to protect their business.
Sure.
So they're going to want to look for less standards, less regulations that would address those. So we need to get a diverse group with our neighborhood leaders and things like that.
I'm trying to think what the mayor is saying, and if I interpret it right, I would like to think what he's saying is some of these landlords can direct you to rental properties that you may not be aware of, because I think, is that what you're talking about?
But
I didn't say that, Lou.
But I think
I would like to
I think
think
it's
that's-
pretty basic. I mean, we have the program right now.
Yeah.
The 2 problems we have are I think what you called,
Nuclear option.
yes, I like that term. That piece and getting into those we haven't. Because I say that because I think the getting into those we haven't will be a domino effect.
Yeah.
On the negligence issue that exist in some form. You know, I don't know what that percent is, but there's some form out there. I mean, there's a reason. And so, yeah, I'm all for sitting down, but at the end of the day, I'm just saying, from me to you, what I want are those two pieces and a list that we say in a very clear manner as the elected body, yes, this is the list, please enforce these items, do it consistently to the properties that we are directing you to inspect. And when anybody then comes back and sends you an email and says, hey, you know, and we say, yeah, well, that's because it's on a list. It applies to everyone. And if we don't want it to apply to you, then we should come back to this table and say, you know what? We don't think you should inspect item X, and we're going to remove it as a body from the list. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're directing staff, you know,
Yeah, I
in
think
different measures, in different ways, to different people and different owners to do different things. And the program cannot work that way.
Paul's correct. In 2008, we did go over, we made some changes, we
I'm all
added
for
some
looking at that
exemptions.
again.
We did those kind of things.
And I'll just say this on that first piece, because I won't stop on that item, is those inclusion of the dormitory, homeless shelter, et cetera. I'm all for sitting down talking with those folks. All I'm saying is there should be a minimum times per so many months that those are inspected for basic, I don't care what you want to call them, living condition, life safety conditions, you know, and they should pass. And if the state or some other entity, you know, which you know is in charge, you know, and has authorization to do so, isn't doing so, or if there isn't some entity, then it should be happening. It just should.
If there is a desire for us to come up with some kind of a mechanism so that we can get into the units that we've never been into before, does that mean that this body is agreeing to language in the ordinance that somehow says
I don't
for
care if
those
the
units
ordinance
we've
says
never
we're
been
gonna do it
into,
one time,
we're scheduling appointments?
and then they're gonna get kicked into the 48-month rotation
And they're gonna be
after that?
they're gonna be inspected,
I'm good with that.
occupied.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
would be
Kathy,
comfortable with.
someone was talking over you. What were you saying?
They're occupied.
That if we're gonna try to figure out a way to put into the ordinance that we get into units we've never been into before, it's gonna have to be the city setting up a systematic inspection of those units, and they're gonna be occupied.
Do we have to pass
But we
an
inspect
ordinance?
occupied units now.
That's reinspection.
As a reinspection,
Okay.
not for the initial. So, but I mean,
But
as.
Section 8 does. I mean, there's other entities that do
Right.
occupy
Correct.
But it's
inspection.
not what's in our ordinance.
And
I'm
as,
saying we just get in them once.
right, and
And then they get rolled into the regular program as it exists now. I'm sure
I
we
feel
can write
like
an
we're
ordinance
making
now.
this
I
way
know.
more
We just
difficult
have
than
to
it
write
needs
it
to
in.
be.
No, I like Councilmember Alshire's analysis of that one, that if we can figure out to write it into the ordinance, that we can do an inspection of the units that we hadn't been in the 15 years of the program, we do that inspection, and then after that point, they call us at the next turnover, whenever it goes.
Man, that would be so easy.
Exactly.
And then
As long as you aren't trying to get an
stronger
administrative
revocation
warrant to
language.
enter
I'm good with that too.
without the landlord present.
I think that was a
Correct.
common,
Yeah, there
a common
would- we
concern.
would always do
that,
something
you know,
with
we
that.
hadn't
That
been
would
in
be
these
so great.
units, you know, we kept hearing that over and over, like, I can't believe that we haven't been in X amount of units.
30%.
30%, we just kept hearing that
Plus, we wouldn't need the
repeatedly.
administrative warrant if we also had in the ordinance, if your license has been revoked, the building is shut down.
Right.
So the
Oh,
folks
yeah,
will
don't get me
not
wrong,
allow
what
us
what
in.
Paul was in today, what he was telling us he was in today, their services need cut off. No water.
Well, they had no water or no electric.
Well, they don't have any
to it,
anyway, right, so it wouldn't help, right? Okay, they can't go by, you can't, I don't know, but something.
Right, okay, so I think we got some clear direction from the council tonight on
Good.
what some of the things we were seeking and stuff
Clear as
there.
mud.
I think that will address it's not per se rewarding the good landlords at this point, but it's addressing the situation of our
bad
landlords.
Right.
Which will make the good landlords very happy.
Very happy.
Well, we're gonna have to work on the other part. but-
Giving you
Yeah.
enforcement tools too.
The only other thing that I've heard from the quote-unquote good landlords that they would like is, they would like this list we talked about, that Lou mentioned, definitive items that are going to be inspected. And when those are inspected, if they fail a couple of items and a reinspection has to happen, when the reinspection happens, we look at those items, not
Only those items.
address.
New
yeah,
items.
Not have new items pop up on the list.
Generally do not unless they corrected something from that list previously that created a new violation type
right.
of a thing, so.
But it's, that's the repeated thing I keep hearing, you know, that, you know, we worked off these 3 items and then 5 more items popped on.
We can provide you that.
All right,
list.
sounds like you have direction. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
City administrators' comments.
Just a couple things from engineering on some traffic and street closures. Actually, street opening, Columbia Gas will reopen Locust Street this Friday at the close of business, so that's good.
Gosh.
Both Pennsylvania Avenue and Northern Avenue will be closed by CSX at the railroad tracks for 3 days next week. And that's, we knew that was coming before, but then they postponed
No
it,
trips
so
to
it's
Martin's,
coming.
apparently.
And that staff has been monitoring the closing of South Potomac, and it's actually been going very well. It will be reevaluated in September when school starts to see if we need to retime the signals or anything like that. But we do continue to watch that. And that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Well, North Locust was open during the weekend because I went up.
Yeah, I went
It's
up
been
to
open.
it.
And I was
And then
happy
tried
until this
again
morning,
today.
and then I couldn't get up it again.
I just
Yeah,
turned
then I couldn't
around
even
right in the
get
middle,
left
I'm like,
there
"Ugh,
today."
this is dumb.
All right.
That's all I have, thank
Shelley
you.
will start.
Just want to mention that this weekend at the farmer's market,
Ice cream, right?
that's right, it's gonna be ice cream at the farmer's market from 9 to 2. There's gonna be live music and kids' activities and 2 new local vendors. So I know that Jill and Emma and Kitty are trying, you know, they created an Instagram account for the farmer's market, so, I mean, it's at least a step in the right direction. But ice cream's always nice, so, that's it.
Yeah, ice cream's good.
Yeah.
Lou?
I had a very enjoyable weekend visiting family in Denver this weekend. I spent a day in Boulder, Colorado, and for those who know Boulder, it's probably one of the most bicycle-friendly cities in the nation. And it just made me proud to see how far Hagerstown has advanced as a bicycle-friendly city. When you see what we've done here, we're not Boulder yet, but it is impressive for what we've done with the city of that nature. Denver is a wonderful city. It's very, upbeat, modernistic, and believe me, they wish they had the homeless problem that Hagerstown has. Homeless people sleeping on the sidewalk is a common thing to see. And the homeless shelter that they have that was, probably 6 or 7 blocks from where I was staying, but I was high up enough, almost has constant ambulances there for overdoses on an incessant basis. So it is a problem faced everywhere in this nation, and in the metropolitan areas, quite candidly, it's a lot worse than it is here. People just learn to ignore it is what happens. And also, the other thing I will say is panhandling there has become almost an organized crime.
Wow.
Well, they have people that actually don't even get to keep all the money they panhandle.
Right.
And
Right.
it's,
Jeez.
yeah, so it's, welcome
New Jack
to it.
City.
Yeah. And that's all.
Hey, you know what? And speaking of bicycle lanes and things like that, I love our bicycle passes, but they're on particularly North Locust Street. There's always someone parked in the bicycle path every single time I go by.
Very frustrating.
Today, I actually had a conversation this morning with some of our police officers, and I was, if I wouldn't have been going by it so fast, I'd have got my see something, send something app out, and I'd have taken a picture and sent it. But we had just got finished talking about it 15 minutes earlier.
That and bicyclists going the wrong way on the, that's very frustrating.
Or not using them, driving on the other side. But I'm like, really? There's a bike path right there.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lou.
nothing tonight.
Cool. Kristen?
A couple of things. The first is, and I saw the email from staff, and obviously got a call from the Herald Mail since they got a copy that was since rescinded, was the ice rink announcement, of expansion. I only say this, it appears that sort of came out of left field, and I have the same opinion about that approach as I did the county's sudden announcement of it down at the Public Safety Training Center is it just makes us appear as a community disoriented and disconnected from one another. And I just don't understand, how we're in the process of this analysis and, these proposals and ideas, sort of come up outside of that singular process, especially on a city-owned property. But, I just had folks this week reach out to me and say, hey, I participated in the deliberations with the consultant, when can we expect, to hear something? And I was just thinking to myself, if they'd have heard, if they'd have read that this week, there's no way that they would have disassociated that announcement from what they participated in, and they would have been like, well, the city moved on without me, and it totally changed the idea.
Those folks
So it's just,
were actually participants in
and that just makes it even
which is,
more
yeah, I was so confused.
frustrating. The second item is, and you brought it up, was the Franklin Street underpass. I know you guys have seen my emails on this, and I've gotten, a significant number of comments from individuals, and I realize the context. You have one individual, and then you have two and three, and now it's four. And they're in a public right of way. They're right next to the police station. And I only say this because this happened 2 years ago on Prospect Street, when a person who lived on Prospect Street said, hey, you have this same issue at the dry bridge underneath, and the person's question was very basic. What are the levels of enforcement for the city? And if this were happening, on your street in front of your house, what would you apply to remedy the issue? And I realize that, it's up near the restaurant, and sort of a commercial area, and it isn't somebody's house, but I cannot accept that the result of that is that it's kept in some orderly fashion and permitted to exist, because here's the reality. If that same exact circumstance was happening in the A&E deck, on public right-of-way in front of the A&E deck, or the Maryland Theater, or I don't know, on Guilford Avenue or up on East Irvin, there's no way that the city's response would be, it's allowed to occur, it's allowed to exist, and it's allowed to be kept. And I say it again, I can't set things out in front of my house within the public right-of-way in perpetuity. And so, I just don't understand how we can pick and choose which places it may be okay, especially given the apparent indication that we always hear in the community that there are more than enough places to provide that assistance. And so, that's my response on that, because I've gotten a significant number of folks in the last week. And the last is there's an article in the Frederick paper, and I always say I like the fact that I get to see the Frederick paper every day in the Herald, because folks often say, here's how Frederick is. But anyway, there were two articles that I took note of. One was yesterday, one was today. The one yesterday was an article that had some kids in the play fountain, the water fountain area along the linear park there in Frederick City. And so that's my a pitch that it does work, and it does bring families in, and especially kids. And if it brings kids, God knows it brings money, because parents can't go anywhere with kids without spending a bunch of money. And then the second was an article about Frederick's continued efforts, and it goes to the farmers market comments earlier, of trying to get a grocery store in the downtown area to serve that population. And I just look at an article like that and go, wow, we talk about the same stuff, so folks should hear.
Refreshing.
Yes, folks should hear that we're not the only ones that struggle with that. There's a highly, successful counterpart
Colorado,
cities,
Frederick.
that have those same exact issues and struggle with the answers, because we're not grocery store owners,
Well, thank God Baltimore doesn't have any problems.
Well, Kristen, I had a meeting today with a young lady who actually runs the Frederick indoor facility. She said no one has talked to her at all. She's a manager there. So I gave her your card. I said, reach out to Kristen. I said, he'd probably be happy to hear some of the things that you can add as far as we move forward on this project. So you may be getting a call from her, okay? I will tell you that the chief and I talked this morning about the Burhans railroad crossing, the situation there on West Franklin, and there are some solutions happening as we speak currently. And thank you very much for your due diligence on that effort, Chief and Tommy. Appreciate it. Emily?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a second and talk about the Baltimore Magazine article, because I think we wanted to talk about it last week, and everyone's kind of like, should we, shouldn't we? So I want to address a couple things about it. I know there were people who were upset about it, and some other people who were saying, hey, this is the truth. I think it was an incredibly well-written article. It was an editorial, so it was someone's opinion, and
It was long.
it was very long, but it was very well written as far as the history of Hagerstown and how we got here. And I think we would be naive to deny that the article wasn't true. I mean, it absolutely was true, but it painted the very negative picture of what is going on here. I think my issue was it didn't offer the flip side, but that wasn't the job of the person who wrote it. The article was, can Hagerstown kick the habit? So it was about the habit. And another reality is you could have replaced the word Hagerstown with Cumberland or with Frederick or with
Any city USA?
yes, any city USA, and taken out our Hagerstown history, and the article would read the same. I mean, this is not an issue that is specific to Hagerstown. We know this problem is hitting Western Maryland and the smaller cities, but something you said online, you said the city and county are finally talking about it and trying to figure out ways to solve the problem. And I think, yeah, that people don't like when we talk about it because they don't want us to paint the city in this light. And for someone who ran a whole campaign on being the positive voice of Hagerstown, I certainly don't want to harp on the negative all the time, but the reality of it is it's where we're at. And we can't move forward as a community and heal and solve the issues until we start talking about it. So I think being that it was an editorial, all 5 of us could write our own editorial about all the really good things that are happening in Hagerstown. I think we see them every week, like Stephen, who was here earlier, and with the Urban Improvement Project, with the updates we get from economic development, with the strides that the health department is making, with all these entities coming together and moving forward. We could do the same thing, and maybe we should. Maybe we should write an editorial to Hagerstown Magazine about the good things that are happening, or to Herald Mail, or maybe CJ can do that for us. But the article subject was about what is wrong with Hagerstown, and I know people were upset, but I don't think we can be mad about it, because we have to address it, and we can't bury our heads in the sand, and that's been happening for a very long time. People burying their heads in the sand and saying, not my neighborhood, not my kid, not my friends. And the reality of it is our neighborhood, and it is our friends, and it is our family. And I think it's very bold to stand up and say, hey, here's what's going on, here's what we're going to do to fix it, and we're all in this together. So I know that article didn't make a lot of people happy, but I think it's a good reality check of where we're at and where we can be. And like I said, I think there's a flip side of it, but that wasn't his job to talk about all the good stuff that was going on. His job was to talk about the underbelly. So I don't know. I thought it was very well written, and I hope that it was a reality check for the people that need it. So that way, instead of saying things like addicts should overdose and get it over with, or whatever, that we can say, hey, this is our community, and let's find ways to fix it.
Okay, that's it. I'm done. I don't have anything.